In this quick little PowerPoint, we're going to go over the different modes of delivery. I'm going to define the four main modes for you and briefly go over some advantages and disadvantages of those different modes. But at the end, I'm going to focus specifically on extemporaneous speaking, the mode of extemporaneous delivery, because that's what you're going to be doing for your speeches in this class. So the four main modes of delivery in any kind of speech is impromptu, manuscript, memorized, or extemporaneous. These are the four different ways and kind of just mediums or modes in which a speech is delivered. The first one is impromptu. An impromptu speech is really an off the cuff speech where you have little to no preparation. Our day to day lives are full of impromptu speeches. Think about it when somebody asks you on a Friday, what are your plans for the weekend? Or on Monday, somebody asks you, what did you do this weekend? You have to quickly organize your thoughts in a way that makes sense so that you can communicate in a way that's organized and easy for the person you're speaking to kind of decode and make sense of, right? Elevator speeches are another perfect example of this. When you bump into a random stranger in the elevator at like a professional work conference or something like that, and they ask you, what do you do for a living, or what's your job, or tell me about your family, or something like that. Impromptu speeches are all about organizing information really quickly and providing it in a way that's logical and easy to understand. Some advantages and disadvantages of an impromptu speech. The advantages are it's easy to adapt to your audience because your audience is right there and they're kind of the ones giving you the topic. Sometimes you don't have enough time for nerves. So you don't have enough time to have that communication apprehension building up ahead of time because you don't have time. You're on the spot. You usually tend to be a lot more genuine. People don't expect perfection, and you can really use nonverbals really effectively in an impromptu situation. Some of the disadvantages, you may not know enough about the topic you're being asked to speak about. You can be really disorganized and flustered when doing this, and it may create even more nerves. The next type of speech is a manuscript speech, and this is literally when the text is right in front of you word for word. This is when everything is written out to you on a piece of paper or it's given to you on a teleprompter, and you literally just read word for word. Presidential addresses are often an example of a manuscript speech where a president speaks to us with a teleprompter in front of them. Some advantages and disadvantages of a manuscript speech. The advantages are you won't forget anything, right? Because it's all right in front of you. They're usually well researched and they're well written because you've had a lot of time to articulate and write out exactly what you want to say, and then it's all right there in front of you when you're delivering it. However, you really are limited with your nonverbals because you're so focused on that piece of paper. That can make things boring for people. If you lose your place, it's kind of hard to retrieve it because you got to look all through all these words on a sheet of paper to find it. The verbal delivery is often very poor. It's very monotone and very boring because you're reading from a script and don't really have time for vocal variety. And if you lose a page or something like that, you're kind of screwed. You're going to have a whole hunk of your speech missing. Memorized speech. This is probably my least favorite form of a speech. This is where you have to deliver the speech from memory, word for word. You memorize it all in your head, word for word. You don't have anything in front of you. This is kind of like acting, in my opinion. Actors kind of memorize their lines in plays and in movies and things like that. This is kind of similar in terms of how a speech would operate if it was memorized. Some advantages and disadvantages of a memorized speech. They're well researched. They're often well written. They give you an opportunity to use nonverbals more effectively than a manuscript speech. There's usually high speaker credibility because, again, the speaker just seems credible because they're stating things word for word. They seem like an expert on the topic because they don't need anything to help them as they talk through it. However, if you lose your place, you're screwed. If you lose your place during a memorized speech, it's really, really hard for you to pick back up and start off where you left off. It may sound stilted, like scripted and just kind of fake in a lot of ways. It might not seem like a genuine personality coming across. And it takes more time to prepare than any other mode because you got to practice, memorize, 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 memorize. It takes a lot of time to get these things right. So what we are doing in this class, the mode that is most important for you to pay attention to because it's the one that you are going to implement, is extemporaneous speaking. This is preparation with limited notes. In your 3x5 note cards, what your goal is for those note cards as you're preparing to use while giving your speech, you want to memorize the structure, and you want to memorize the main points, and you want to memorize the order in which those main points come up, right? If I ask you, provide me a summary of your speech. You should be able to tell me your attention getter. You should be able to tell me your thesis state. You should really be able to tell me your entire introduction section without looking at your notes. Then you should be able to tell me main point one is this, main point two is this, main point three is this. You should be able to tell me what in-text citations are going to be in each main point, a brief summary of the research that's going to be incorporated in each main point. You should be able to rehearse your conclusion, but you shouldn't be able to know this word for word, because the key about extemporaneous speaking is speaking conversational. If you give a speech one time in the day and then you give it later in the day, it shouldn't be the exact same words used throughout the two speeches. It's the same speech you're delivering, but you're doing it at different times. It should be in the same order. It should have the same content. It should cover the same things, but each time you deliver it, it should feel genuine, like your personality, and it should be at a very conversational tone. This is kind of a blend of all three other methods. It's kind of spontaneous, like an impromptu, because you're kind of spontaneously crafting it together as you go each time. It's well researched and organized, like a manuscript speech. You can see for the requirements for the speech that you have to do research. You have to incorporate in that to your speech. I need to see it in your outline, and I need to hear it when you speak. And it also provides opportunities for nonverbals like a memorized speech, because you just have small note cards in your hand and you also don't need to be reading in a manuscript the entire time. There's freedom for you to use your nonverbals most effectively. So some advantages and disadvantages of an extemporaneous speech. The advantages are you're able to adapt to your audience a lot because you're not stuck to a word for word paper. If something changes, if your audience is giving you a certain type of feedback, whether that's facial expressions, body posture, whatever, you can adapt to that a little bit. You're free to use your nonverbals more effectively with an extemporaneous speech, both how you use your voice and how you use your body, because you're not limited by the resources that you need to use, and you're not limited by memorizing word for word. It's really well organized, it's well researched, and again, that natural language comes out. Your natural personality, your natural conversational tone should emerge when speaking extemporaneously. The disadvantages are if you write illegible notes, you're really going to screw yourself up. Don't have too many notes because you risk mixing them up as you're going through them. That's why you should only have 3 note cards for the speech, three 3x5 note cards. Try to avoid playing with your notes when they're in your hand. They shouldn't be the most present thing while you're giving your speech. You should only look at them momentarily every, 15, 20, 30 seconds while speaking. And also, if you come up with a loss of words, that could be a pitfall. So, again, prepare really good notes. They should be note cards. They should be, a condensed, smaller version of your outline. Don't include too much in there to the point where you get lost and confused, but they should definitely be kind of the linear step by step of what your speech is, and you should be able to use those note cards to follow your speech basically step by step as you're speaking. And so finally, like I said, I want to emphasize you are using the extemporaneous mode for delivery in this course. So as you're working on your speeches and you're focusing on the delivery part of speeches, definitely review extemporaneous speaking a lot, review it in your textbook, make sure you have a clear understanding of what it is and what it's all about.